Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to D News Plus today. I'm Trace, and this is episode 2 of 3 in our series on propaganda, obviously the bestest of the episodes that we've ever made, because we said so. So when did we start using propaganda, and what exactly is it for? And what is it exactly, and how does it work? And these are all the questions that we are hoping to answer throughout this series. If you have other questions, you can tweet at us. We're at DNews. You can use the hashtag DNewsPlus. You can also find me out on Twitter. I'm at Trace Dominguez if you have any questions or want to just chat. But today we're going to talk about how propaganda works. So let's kick into it. First of all, what is the goal of propaganda? I mean, the goal is stories or information. The idea is to spread your cause, right? We were just talking about this. So we want to change the course of an insurgency. We want to frame a negotiation. We want to play a role in a political radicalization. We want to influence methods or goals of violent social movements. This is all according to Darpa, by the way. And in case you're wondering why Darpa is involved, more on that in a second. Basically, propaganda is information based in bias. It's coming at you from a slant. You could argue that many of the cable news stations we watch today are filled with more propaganda than they are news, because that's where propaganda and news are separated. News is supposed to come at you without a slant, just to present information that you then decide what to do with. This does not present information. Propaganda presents bias. And again, it's used to promote a particular point of view. So if you ask yourself when you're looking at something, if it's promoting a particular point of view, obviously, then it's probably propaganda more than anything else. We've already talked about propaganda throughout history, but what about how it works? DARPA plans to team up with neuroscientists to find out exactly that. The project that they're creating is called Narrative Networks. If the Pentagon understands how stories can alter how you think, they hope to find those vulnerable to violent ideas, those in the process of being recruited by terrorist groups, for example, and present counter-messaging to help keep them away from terrorist groups using propaganda. Most of the time, again, we think about propaganda as a negative. Try and push that out of your mind, because propaganda and positivity is not necessarily mutually exclusive. Propaganda is bias, but what the propaganda is about can be positive or negative. We don't have their findings, by the way, from the narrative networks yet, but it got us wondering how propaganda does play a role in this terrorist recruitment. I went to the Summit on Extremism that YouTube put on a while ago, and we talked about how terrorist groups use tools like YouTube and Twitter and Facebook and other social medias to try and recruit people and educate them about their specific viewpoints. And many people categorize ISIS using those same networks. And they'll say things like ISIS is a mental illness, they're religious fanatics, they're nihilistic. And there might actually be a deeper psychology here, because propaganda relies very heavily on biased images and speeches and videos. Usually it hits your emotional centers before it hits your intellectual centers. And they usually target fear as the emotion that they want to bring out in you, because it's a very powerful emotion and it doesn't make you think about things, it makes you react. So ISIS is out there making videos and tweeting and trying to get people to listen to their propaganda, and the Pentagon and the State Department and people all over the world are tweeting back and trying to get you to listen to their propaganda. So not only is propaganda no longer a pamphlet being handed to you, but now it's surrounding you and it's everywhere, and that's really interesting. Many people join terrorist organizations not purely on religious beliefs, but a need to find personal significance. They need to matter or be respected or be recognized in the eyes of others, and without it, they feel like they may have no purpose. That is one way that propaganda can target people to get them to come and join up. They get to be part of something larger. A militant group's extremist propaganda strategically exploits stuff like that. Scott Atran, an anthropologist who advises the United Nations and the White House on terrorism, said that ISIS recruiters can spend hundreds of hours analyzing problems around the world, problems in the lives of the recruits or the people they're targeting to recruit, and they connect those to larger problems that ISIS is fighting, or so the recruiters tell the people they're trying to recruit. They take this and then they couple it with the shattering of identity, which comes back to fear, and a skewed depiction of one's degradation as a group. Essentially, your country is degraded, is problematic. ISIS is trying to build the perfect nation, right? So they'll say something like that to try and get people to join up. The thing is, there is no such thing as a perfect nation, and your country may be degraded from one point of view, but not from another. It depends on how you look at it. All of that is skewed way out of the way with bias, which is how the propaganda works. And this only works if you don't think about it and you just react to it, right? If I tell you America is the greatest country in the world, and you never think about what that means and what the greatest country really is, that's propaganda, right? Because what is the greatest country in the world? How can you decide? It might be one of, it probably is a lot of things. But just saying a statement like that is very difficult to back up with facts, and it makes it very difficult to not just call it propaganda. The question also that comes to mind is propaganda ethical? That really depends on how extreme the propaganda is. Saying America is the greatest country in the world isn't super extreme. Most countries, most people, most teams, they are the number one, right? My team's number one, your team's number one. Every team can't be number one, but everybody says they're the best in the world. Mom's famous cookies, world famous, best in the world, right? We all do that. It's part of kind of building ourselves up but if you talk about it in extreme ways and start to break down other people, that can be a problem. And as things get more and more extreme, they get less and less ethical. As we said earlier, propaganda isn't always a bad thing. When it's used in politics and war, things can get very dicey. And there are types of propaganda that are positive that you have been exposed to. For example, anti-smoking propaganda. One commercial in Thailand called The Smoking Kid used hidden cameras to film small children walking up to adults who were smoking and asked them to light a cigarette that the kid was holding. The adults told them that smoking was bad. The kids then handed them a piece of paper saying, "Why do you care about me and not yourself?" That's pretty powerful propaganda. It resulted in a 40% increase of people calling to quit in Thailand. 5 million views were made on that video in 10 days. It's a pretty powerful piece of propaganda, but it is propaganda, right? The CDC had an anti-smoking campaign that you might remember. Tips from a former smoker campaign. It had a woman with a stoma, or a hole in her neck after larynx cancer, so they had to remove her larynx in a laryngectomy. And she talks to the camera about how she gets ready for the day. People who smoke are 40 times more likely to get this type of cancer than non-smokers. In 2013, 89,000 people in the U.S. were living with larynx cancer. She puts on fake teeth and a wig and a hands-free device that she inserts into her stoma and says, "Now you're ready for the day." That's another pretty powerful piece of propaganda, but one could argue it's positive propaganda. It's a health propaganda. It's trying to get people to be more healthy. The question is, how effective is propaganda? When it comes to spreading messages of war and policy and, things that are a little more nebulous, it's hard to measure directly how many people weren't going to vote for Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump or Gary Johnson or Jill Stein and now are going to vote for them based on propaganda that was put out by one group, another group, or anyone. However, when it comes to stuff like smoking and health ads, those are usually put out with a specific goal in mind. So in 2012, a study in The Lancet showed 1.6 million smokers tried to quit in response, and 100,000 succeeded thanks to these ads, these anti-smoking propaganda ads. That was in 2012. The Truth Campaign tells teens that smoking is not a form of rebellion, but rather an industry telling them what they should do and them doing it. A body bag commercial launched in the year 2000 shows protester teens putting 1,200 empty body bags outside of the Philip Morris headquarters. They see in the commercial an employee looking down through the window while protesters with megaphones ask if they know that 1,200 people die from tobacco every day. Another very powerful piece of propaganda. All of those things are propaganda that you've seen, experienced, or maybe you even knew existed already. What about internet propaganda? It totally exists. I mean, based on what your definition of propaganda is, which if you listen to communications professor Philip Taylor, propaganda is really no more than the communication of ideas designed to persuade people to think and behave in a desired way. So propaganda is posting your point of view on Facebook. You are trying to convince people that you are correct. You are trying to propagate your beliefs to others. We are propagandizing each other now, which is kind of insane, right? Ben Franklin and Paul Revere were trying to incite a war by propagandizing their fellow Americans. And the Nazis were trying to, tell everyone that things were going okay or that there were bad people in the world and they were not them. And Americans were trying to say, don't talk to your fellow man about what's going on with your brother in the war because the enemy could hear it. And now you're telling your friend, dude, pumpkin spice lattes are the best. And you're propagandizing, technically. It's kind of weird. If you post a single point of view and that post gets liked and shared or retweeted or reblogged or whatever, is that propaganda? What do you think? Did we go too far in D News Plus today? Calling you propagandizing jerks out there? You're not really jerks. Let us know in the comments. And why don't we start thinking about this for tomorrow? What exactly is propaganda then? If propaganda could be everything, what exactly is it? If you want to learn some other cool stuff as well, check out The Great Courses Plus. We want to thank them. They sponsored this episode of D News. The Great Courses Plus gives you on-demand access to a huge library of super awesome video courses presented by experts in their fields. Check out Experiencing the Hubble, Understanding the Greatest Images of the Universe. You can find it on The Great Courses Plus. It's pretty amazing. If you want unlimited access to all of The Great Courses Plus lectures, you can help out the show and get a free month. Just go to thegreatcoursesplus.com/DNewsPlus. That's thegreatcoursesplus.com/DNewsPlus. The link is also in the description. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you tomorrow to find out what exactly propaganda is. Thanks for watching.